Excuse me, ma'am. Why is there a police officer speaking to my son without me present? Your son? Karen scoffed, arms folded, eyes cold. That boy's been pacing in circles and mumbling to himself for the last 30 minutes. I assumed he was casing the neighborhood. She didn't know, didn't ask, didn't care. She just saw a quiet child flapping his hands and thought, danger. But the boy she called suspicious was my son. And the woman she called for backup didn't know she was talking to a civil rights attorney with a federal track record longer than her HOA violation list. She crossed a line, and I was going to bury her entire kingdom under it. It started like most quiet Saturdays in Brookstone Grove. Blue sky, trimmed lawns, the faint scent of chlorine from backyard pools. My son, Eli, had just finished his favorite weekend ritual, walking a loop around the neighborhood with his noise-canceling headphones and his Dino Stomp playlist. He always did exactly 3 loops, always walked in the same direction, always ended with a little celebration dance near the playground. He was nonverbal, diagnosed with autism at 4, 10 years old now, taller than expected, smarter than most people gave him credit for, and the kindest soul I've ever known. So when I saw the flashing blue lights through my kitchen window, my first thought wasn't panic. It was confusion. I stepped outside, barefoot, still in my hoodie and pajama pants. That's when I saw him, Eli, standing frozen near the swings. And next to him, a uniformed officer, hand on his belt, talking into his radio. Then came her voice, shrill, condescending, confident. Karen Morgan, president of the Brookstone Grove HOA, stood by the curb, arms crossed, talking loud enough for half the block to hear. I've warned this community about unidentified individuals loitering near communal spaces. Safety has to come first. I marched up without hesitation. Excuse me, officer. That's my son you're interrogating. He blinked, visibly uncomfortable. Ma'am, I was responding to a report of a suspicious juvenile. Suspicious? I looked down at Eli, who was now rocking gently, hands pressed to his temples, his signal for sensory overload. He lives here. That's our house, I pointed. Karen interjected. He's been walking around in circles, flapping, muttering. It looked off. What was I supposed to think? You were supposed to ask. I turned fully toward her now, voice sharpening. You saw a disabled child following a routine and assumed he was a threat. I didn't know he was, she started. You didn't care, I cut in. You called the police before you even confirmed whether he was a resident or a child. The officer cleared his throat awkwardly. Look, this seems like a misunderstanding. No, I snapped. This is profiling. This is discrimination. And this, I pointed at Karen, is a civil rights violation waiting to happen. Karen scoffed. I'm the HOA president. I'm responsible for community safety. Then I suggest you familiarize yourself with the ADA, the Fair Housing Act, and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, because right now you're in violation of all 3. Her eyes narrowed. I'll be filing a formal complaint with the HOA, she said stiffly. Please do, I replied. And when you get the letter from my law firm, you can staple it to your clipboard. She flinched like I'd slapped her. I spent the rest of that day calming Eli down. The police presence had rattled him, his favorite routine now tainted, his peaceful loops now a source of anxiety. And that, more than anything, made me seethe. I wasn't just his mother. I was an advocate, a licensed civil rights attorney with a specialty in educational access and disability protections. And Karen had just opened the door to a legal hurricane she couldn't spell her way out of. I pulled out my laptop. Step 1, document everything. Photos of Eli's daily walking route. His official diagnosis, our residency documents. A screenshot of Karen's HOA profile. The officer's name and badge number. Step 2, interview the neighbors. 3 of them had witnessed the incident. 2 said Karen had been hovering around Eli all morning with her phone out. 1 said she heard Karen say, "He gives me the creeps." Step 3, file. By Sunday evening, Karen had a certified letter on her doorstep. By Monday morning, my firm had sent a formal ADA complaint to the HOA board. By Wednesday, a local reporter called me personally. It's rare to see a lawyer go after their own HOA, she said. I replied, it's even rarer to see an HOA try to police neurodivergent children in 2025. She asked for a quote. I gave her one. My son isn't suspicious. He's autistic. The real danger is people like Karen who use policy as a weapon against people they don't understand. That quote made the morning paper. By lunchtime, it was trending. Justice for Eli. My kid is not a suspect nario abuse. Karen didn't show her face for 3 days, but I wasn't done. Because the goal wasn't just to punish her. The goal was to make sure this never happened again. Karen resurfaced on Thursday. She wasn't on foot this time. No clipboard, no forced smile. She stood at the end of her driveway while a news van idled down the street, arms crossed again. But this time, her body language wasn't confident. It was cornered. I watched from my porch as the reporter tried to approach her. Karen waved her away, then turned and stormed inside. Cameras caught the whole thing. 10 minutes later, I got an email. Subject, HOA formal review request. From Karen Morgan. We understand a recent incident has been mischaracterized in the media and has caused emotional distress to the community. In light of this, we would like to open a dialogue to clarify perspectives. Clarify perspectives. That's what they always say when they're backed into a legal corner and still refuse to admit they were wrong. I forwarded it straight to my legal assistant. Attach this to the ADA file, I said, and flag it under strategic minimization. By Friday, I was on a panel at a citywide disability rights forum. I hadn't planned on it, but the organizer had seen the news story and called me personally. You're one of the few lawyers who's lived it, she said. Not just practiced it. The panel was powerful. Parents, advocates, neurodivergent teens who had been harassed by neighbors, schools, even local officials. Eli sat in the front row with noise-canceling headphones on, his favorite dinosaur hoodie zipped up to his chin. He didn't understand every word, but he understood enough to know that he was the reason I stood at that podium. I spoke simply, but I didn't hold back. When someone sees a disabled child and assumes danger, that's not safety, that's discrimination. When an HOA weaponizes rules to silence the vulnerable, that's not governance. It's tyranny in khakis. The audience exploded. Afterward, people approached us in waves. Some wanted legal help. Some wanted to share stories. But one woman, about 60, leaned in with trembling hands. She did the same thing to my grandson last year, she whispered. Called the police because he was drawing with chalk on the sidewalk. He was 6. I took her name and number. You're not alone, I told her. Not anymore. Over the next 72 hours, my inbox exploded. 14 separate families contacted me with similar stories involving Karen. 3 former HOA board members admitted they'd resigned because of her tactics. One anonymous tipster forwarded me internal meeting notes. Karen had kept lists, names of problem families. Repeat violators, and next to Eli's name, unsupervised child. Possible behavioral instability. That line alone made my blood turn to ice, but it also handed me everything I needed to escalate. I filed an official complaint with the Department of Housing and Urban Development, CHUD, citing discrimination under the Fair Housing Act and ADA Title II. Attached, notes, emails, testimonies. Then I filed a civil suit. Against Karen, against the HOA, and, by extension, every board member who had sat silently while this culture festered. Monday morning, the board tried damage control. They issued a statement calling the incident a deep misunderstanding, full of carefully crafted buzzwords like inclusion, awareness, and regret. It was the PR version of a toddler hiding behind their hands and saying, "You can't see me." Too little, too late. Because that afternoon I held a community town hall at the local library, not under HOA supervision, not with permission. Just me, a microphone, and rows of folding chairs filled with neighbors who had had enough. I played excerpts from the internal emails, shared quotes, read Karen's note about my son aloud. The room turned cold. A man in the back stood up and said, "She threatened to fine me $400 for leaving a Halloween pumpkin out on November 1st. Another, she told my daughter her wheelchair ramp was clashing with the neighborhood aesthetic." The room ignited. By the end of the night, we had 82 resident signatures demanding Karen's resignation, 37 recorded testimonials, a new interim committee. And I left that meeting not just as Eli's mom or a lawyer or the woman who had filed the lawsuit, but as the person who finally gave this community its voice back. Karen sent another email the next day. Due to emotional strain, I will be stepping back temporarily from my position as HOA president. Translation, I'm losing control, and I need time to clean up the blood before more people see it. But it was too late for that. I filed a motion with the county to freeze HOA enforcement until a full review could be completed. Then I filed a formal bar complaint to investigate whether Karen's enforcement guidelines violated constitutional rights. Turns out, she had taken it upon herself to design her own code of conduct, unapproved by vote. The local paper ran an op-ed titled, "The Mother Lawyer Wrecking Ball: How One Woman Gave Her Neighborhood Back Its Humanity." But it wasn't about me. It was about every single person who sat silent for years because they thought no one would believe them. Now they knew better. And Karen? Karen was finally learning what it felt like to be watched, evaluated, judged. Only this time the rules weren't hers. And the consequences? Oh, they were just beginning. The first time Karen saw her own name in bold font on a legal document, I imagine her hands trembled. The suit was official, filed, stamped, served directly to her front porch. Morgan versus HOA of Brookstone Grove, civil complaint number 257C. Plaintiff, Abigail Rhodes. representing minor Elias Rhodes. Basis: violations of the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Fair Housing Act, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. I never saw her reaction in person, but I did see the blinds in her living room close permanently the next morning. HUD contacted me within a week. They were launching an independent investigation. They had received multiple complaints over the years, most buried under insufficient documentation or resolved internally. But now those complaints had a face, a lawyer, a case number, and, most importantly, momentum. The investigator, Ms. Cormack, spoke with clinical efficiency. "We've seen this pattern in wealthier HOAs," she said. "People confuse regulation with righteousness. They weaponize uniformity, then pretend it's about peace." She asked for everything, and I gave her everything. Photos, logs, audio, video. Neighbors began submitting their own reports. Stories that had festered silently for years were now flooding into HUD, the local ADA coalition, and the state attorney's office. Karen wasn't just on the defensive, she was drowning. That weekend, something incredible happened. A dozen neighbors gathered in the park with their kids, some autistic, some not, and held a small celebration they called Freedom to Be. Eli was invited. He wore his dino hoodie and headphones, clapped along to the music, and stomped happily in rhythm. For the first time in weeks, he looked completely at peace. And then I saw something that stopped me in my tracks. Karen's old board lieutenant, Greg Withers, walked up with his wife and son. He held out a folder. "I was wrong," he said plainly. "We all were. We thought following Karen kept us safe. Turns out it just kept us silent." The folder contained internal vote records. How many times Karen overrode decisions by executive authority. A phrase that didn't exist in the HOA bylaws. She'd invented it, and they'd let her. By Monday, my inbox had exploded again. This time, it wasn't just HOA victims. It was legal professionals, civil rights groups, national nonprofits. One email stood out. Subject: interested in national case coordination. From Disability Justice Alliance, Washington, D.C. They wanted to interview me, feature the case, possibly use it as precedent in a broader push for HOA accountability across the country. I said yes, because this wasn't just about Karen anymore. It never really had been. It was about every autistic child labeled a threat, every family who apologized for their existence, every parent who had to carry both love and legal fire just to keep their kids safe. Karen made one last move. On the third Monday after the suit was filed, her lawyer issued a public statement. Ms. Morgan denies all allegations of discriminatory intent. Her actions were taken in accordance with HOA safety protocols and community expectations. They tried to reframe it, make her the victim, portray Eli as a misunderstood presence who was concerning due to his movements and silence. They used words like emotional context and visual uncertainty. What they didn't realize? Every word was being watched now, and people were furious. The next morning, I walked out to find a stack of notes and letters left on my doorstep. Handwritten, typed, folded, crumpled. "Thank you for fighting." She said the same thing about my son. "You made me feel human again." She told me I was too loud because I have a stutter. I never thought anyone would believe us. I cried for the first time since the police approached Eli, not because I was sad, because I wasn't alone. The HOA held a forced emergency vote the following week. It wasn't up for discussion anymore. The bylaws were being rewritten. Karen was being removed, not suspended, not reassigned. Banned from leadership, from voting privileges, from contacting residents in any enforcement capacity whatsoever. It passed 174-3. The final clause in the motion: the HOA board shall never again have the power to police human behavior under the guise of community comfort. I was asked to write it myself. Karen tried to file a countersuit. It was dismissed in 48 hours, not just because it lacked evidence, but because her legal team resigned the next morning. The lead attorney issued a quiet statement. "Our firm does not support the continued defense of discriminatory enforcement actions in violation of federal protections." She was toxic now, uninsurable, unemployable, unwelcome, and I didn't celebrate. I just sat on my porch that evening beside Eli, watching him draw dinosaur footprints in chalk along the sidewalk. For the first time, he didn't flinch when someone walked by. And for the first time, they smiled at him, not because they felt obligated, but because they finally saw him. When the sun rose over Brookstone Grove the morning after Karen's removal, it felt like the entire neighborhood exhaled. No more whispering. No more dread over mailbox citations or phantom violations. No more watching your child play in the yard and wondering who might be secretly filming them. For the first time in years, we were free. But freedom comes with responsibility. So the next step wasn't celebration. It was reconstruction. The HOA board, now reduced to 4 humbled members and 2 newly elected parents, invited me to sit as legal advisor to their policy overhaul committee. I declined the title, but I showed up to every meeting. Not for them, for Eli, for the kid who just wanted to walk in circles and pretend he was a stegosaurus stomping through Jurassic Jungle. And for the other kids, because after what happened, parents stopped hiding their truths. It turned out we had 3 other autistic children on the block. 2 teens with ADHD, 1 veteran with PTSD who'd been reported twice for pacing too aggressively near the mailboxes. Karen had nearly erased all of them under the banner of community expectations. But now we had a new phrase, community dignity. It became the cornerstone of every rewritten bylaw. We eliminated Karen's executive override clause entirely, created a grievance protocol that required third-party mediation, not just a board HOA panel, revised the reporting forms so that no one could claim suspicion without real, documentable cause. And most importantly, we added training, mandatory. Every board member, every committee rep, every volunteer, training in disability awareness, in neurodivergence, in trauma-informed conflict resolution. Some grumbled. Some resigned. Good. We didn't need compliance. We needed empathy. That spring, we hosted Brookstone Grove's first ever Neurodiversity Day. It wasn't flashy, just a few booths, a sensory-friendly play area, a music zone with noise-canceling headsets, and a long row of sidewalk chalk for anyone who wanted to draw. Eli was the first to pick a color. He chose green, his favorite. He drew dinosaur tracks all around the gazebo, and when he flapped his hands in excitement, no one flinched. They smiled. One parent bent down beside him and asked, "What kind of dino are you today?" Eli didn't answer, but he looked up and smiled back. After the event, a mother approached me with tears in her eyes. "My daughter's been hiding who she is for years," she said, "because of this place, because of Karen. But today she asked if we can leave her hearing aids visible." She paused. "Because she saw your son be himself." That one hit me harder than any court ruling. Because sometimes changing policy is just the first step. The real change? That happens in the quiet moments. When fear evaporates, when identity becomes something you don't have to apologize for. Karen moved out the following month. No announcement. No goodbye. Just a moving truck at 6 a.m., windows drawn, her usual arrogance replaced with silence. Eli and I watched from the window. He waved. Not mockingly, not spitefully. Just waved. Because he didn't carry her weight. He had already moved on. That night, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. Karen's. I still don't understand why it spiraled like that. I truly thought I was helping the community. But maybe I confused control with safety. Maybe I stopped seeing people. I hope your son is okay. I never meant to hurt him. There was no apology. Not really, but I folded the letter and tucked it into the back of Eli's victory folder. The one we'd built after every speech, every court filing, every community win. Because someday he'd read it, and he'd know that even the people who hurt him had to acknowledge his impact. Eli's walks changed too. He still did 3 loops, still wore his headphones, still stomped when he finished. But now, others joined him. Kids, parents, even an old man with a walker who said, "I'm a velociraptor today." Eli didn't say much, but he smiled. And in his own way, I think he knew he had led a revolution. I spoke at a national conference that summer. The topic, how a neighborhood became a movement. At the end of my speech, I said this. My son never spoke a word in his own defense. But he changed laws, he changed minds, he changed the story. And that is what dignity looks like. Standing ovation. Eli watched from the wings. When I walked off stage, he held out his hand. Green chalk dust still on his fingers. We're still here, still walking loops, still rewriting what community means. And every time I see a kid be unapologetically themselves, every time a neighbor steps in instead of away, I think, this is the world Karen tried to stop. And this is the world we built in spite of her. The day the federal report dropped, I sat on my porch with a coffee in one hand and Eli's green chalk in the other. The headline was simple. HUD investigation concludes. Discrimination confirmed. Brookstone Grove HOA found in violation of federal law. Underneath it, Karen Morgan permanently barred from serving on any residential board or association in the state. They'd made it official. Everything we knew in our hearts had been validated on paper. I exhaled so deeply it felt like the end of a trial. Because it was. Not just in the legal sense, but the emotional one. The report was long, over 100 pages of testimonies, policies, and community interviews. The conclusion? Karen had operated the HOA like a private police force, targeted marginalized families, broke ADA and fair housing laws repeatedly. HUD used a phrase I'll never forget. An abuse of suburban authority under the pretense of order. That line told me they finally understood what so many families had endured. Eli didn't understand every word of the report, but he understood my face. He flapped quietly as I read it aloud. And when I finished, he stepped outside, chalk in hand, and began drawing loops on the sidewalk. Green spirals, big ones, like growth rings on a tree that had survived every storm. He wasn't scared anymore, because he knew, on some deep, core level, that he had won. That same week, a national law journal published an op-ed titled, "The Lawyer Who Turned HOA Hell into Federal Reform." They asked for a headshot. I sent one of Eli instead, smiling, hands in the air, a bright green dinosaur drawn on his shirt. I wrote in the caption, "This is what justice looks like, not me, him." I declined every talk show offer, refused every podcast request. I didn't want fame. I wanted safety. And not just for Eli. For every family who had ever felt like they had to earn their right to exist peacefully in their own neighborhood. So instead of speaking for them, I started training them. Workshops, community guides, a nonprofit startup called Flatback HOA Accountability for Neurodiverse Families. We hosted seminars on housing rights, taught parents how to document, report, escalate, gave them templates, scripts, courage, and when I saw them walk into those spaces not with fear, but with purpose, I knew the real fight had just begun, and I was ready. Eli turns 12 next month. He's taller now. His loops are wider, his drawings more intricate. He still doesn't say much, but his presence, it's loud in the best possible way. His old elementary school just asked if they could name the new sensory garden after him. I said yes, and when they asked what we wanted on the plaque, I didn't even have to think. They'll walk in your loops. The world will catch up. Well, see, sometimes I still get emails from Karen's sympathizers. Not many. The kind that say things like, "But you ruined her life over one misunderstanding." I don't respond. Because I didn't ruin anything. She built a system on fear. I just flipped the lights on. Karen now lives in a condo 3 towns over. No HOA, no leadership roles, no committees, just rules she has to follow, with no one to rewrite them in her favor. I don't know if she's changed. And honestly, it doesn't matter. Because this story was never about Karen. It was about Eli. And every kid like him who learned the hard way that different makes you a target. Not anymore. Not here. Not ever again. Last Sunday, Eli and I took a walk, 3 loops just like always. But this time, we weren't alone. 3 other kids walked beside him, laughing, spinning, drawing dino tracks in chalk. Parents waved, doors stayed open. No one watched from behind curtains anymore. And when we got to the end of the last loop, Eli stopped, looked back, smiled, and for the first time ever, he took off his headphones.